"Hold the tree line," Hauptmann Dreher had said, as if the words alone could stop what was coming. That was 4 hours ago. Now Gefreiter Lucas Brandt lay flat against the frozen earth, his cheek pressed into snow that smelled of pine rot and old ash, listening to a silence so complete it had weight. The tree line was a black wall ahead of them, spruce and birch crowded together, branches sagging under ice, the kind of forest that swallowed sound and gave nothing back. Lucas's platoon had dug shallow positions along a frozen ditch at the edge of a cleared field, maybe 30 meters from those trees, and for the last 2 hours, nobody had fired a shot. Nobody had moved. The wind had even stopped. That was the problem. The wind had stopped. Lucas counted the men he could see. Hoffmann to his left, 17 and shaking. Old Recker further along, a former post office clerk, who held his carabiner like it was something borrowed, and Unteroffizier Karl Mertens, 12 meters to the right, crouched low behind a fallen birch log, scanning the dark with the slow patience of someone who had learned not to blink. Mertens was 34, built like a fence post, with a face that had stopped showing anything around the time of Kursk. If Mertens was scared, nobody was going to know it. Lucas flexed his fingers inside his gloves. The cold had become a kind of noise, a steady hum beneath every other sensation. His boots had stopped hurting an hour ago, which he knew was a bad sign. He reached into his coat pocket without looking and touched the folded paper there. The letter he'd been writing to his mother in Dortmund for 11 days. He never finished them. He never threw them away either. "Dear Mama, we are still moving west. The cold here is different from home. It doesn't feel like weather, it feels like intention." A branch cracked in the tree line. Lucas's hand moved to his rifle before his brain caught up. He pressed himself lower, slowing his breath. Beside him, Hoffmann had gone completely rigid. Across the ditch, Mertens held up a fist without turning around, still halting, and the gesture traveled down the line like a whisper. Nothing emerged from the trees. 30 seconds, a minute. The cold settled back in. Lucas let out a breath so slowly it barely fogged. Then Private Schutz, 20 meters to his right, simply fell sideways. No crack of a rifle, no sound at all. He folded at the knees and went down into the snow, and it took Lucas a full second to understand what had happened, because his brain refused to accept it. The absence of noise, the casual way Schutz's helmet rolled off and stopped against a root. "Scharfschütze!" someone shouted, and the ditch erupted. Men dropped flat or scrambled sideways. Lucas pressed his face into the frozen mud and tried to think, tried to breathe, tried to be smaller than he was. The shot had come from deep in the trees. No muzzle flash visible, no follow-up. A sniper. Possibly one. Possibly three. The Soviets had learned to work in small teams, patient as stones, invisible until the moment they weren't. Mertens crawled to Schutz. He checked him for 5 seconds, then looked up and shook his head. The platoon lay there for 40 more minutes, unable to advance, unable to retreat across the open field behind them without presenting their backs. Lucas spent that time with his cheek against the earth, watching the trees, feeling the cold move up through his ribcage like water rising in a hull. He thought about the rifle, about the bolt mechanism, about whether the oil had thickened in the freeze. He thought about anything except Schutz's helmet rolling in the snow. When Mertens finally gave the signal to fall back by sections, low and fast, using the ditch's bend for cover, Lucas moved on instinct alone. He ran bent double across 20 meters of frozen field, waiting for a sound that never came, and threw himself behind a stone wall on the far side, breathing like a man pulled from drowning. He turned to check who had made it. Hoffmann, Recker, Fischer, Baumann, Kern. 7 men. They'd started the night with 11. Mertens reached the wall last, sliding in beside Lucas without expression. He looked back at the tree line for a long moment, then pulled out his map, a folded, sweat-softened thing with red pencil marks crossing out position after position, and studied it by the pale light of the snow. "We move at first light," he said. "North road toward Heiligenbeil, no fires." "What about Schutz?" Hoffmann asked. His voice was barely holding together. "We can't carry him." Mertens folded the map. "He's not the first." Lucas looked at the tree line one more time. Somewhere in those trees, someone had watched them for hours before pulling a trigger. Someone patient, trained, cold as the ground itself. He thought about the footprints they'd found earlier. A small set, deep pressed, moving parallel to the ditch, and then simply stopping in a patch of hard ice, as if the shooter had stood there, turned, and ceased to exist. He touched the letter in his pocket again. The cold here feels like intention. If this story is moving you, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We read everyone. Dawn came grey and grudging, the sky a low ceiling of cloud that turned the snow blue. The North Road looked like a wound in the landscape, a single cleared track running between dark fields, churned to mud and ice by the passage of thousands. They heard it before they saw it, the creak of wooden wheels, the low voices of people too tired for full sentences, the occasional bellow of a horse. The refugee column stretched as far as Lucas could see in both directions. He had known about the columns, everyone knew. The retreat was folding civilians into the military withdrawal like sand into concrete. But knowing and seeing were different things. There were carts piled with furniture and blankets, children riding on top of bundled mattresses, old men walking with the slow determination of people who had decided not to think past the next kilometer. A woman passed, pushing a perambulator with a squeaking wheel, and Lucas noticed she wasn't looking at it. Wasn't looking at anything, just pushing. Merton stopped at the road's edge and watched them pass with an expression that might have been impatience or something older and harder. "We'll use the column for cover," he said flatly. "Move along its edge. Don't slow down and don't get separated." "There are children out there," Fisher said. "There are Soviets in the trees," Mertens replied. "Move." They fell in along the column's right flank, rifles slung, moving at the pace of the carts. Lucas walked close enough to the civilians that he could hear individual voices. An old woman reciting something under her breath, a boy asking his father a question and getting no answer. Two women arguing in low tones about a route that no longer existed. He noticed the girl, the woman, because she was walking differently from the others. Not the slow shuffle of exhaustion, but a deliberate, measured pace, the kind people adopt when they are conserving energy on purpose. She was maybe 28, wearing a heavy coat that had once been good quality. Her dark hair pulled back under a wool cap. Beside her, a boy of perhaps 14 walked with one hand gripping her coat sleeve. Not from fear, Lucas decided, but habit. The habit of not being separated. She caught him looking and didn't look away. That surprised him. "Are you with the column or guarding it?" she
Tell me
asked.
honestly, Character
Her
One,
voice
what
was
have you been
level,
hiding?
teacher precise.
Hiding?
"Moving with
She
it,"
makes me feel like
Lucas
there's
said.
nowhere to
"For
hide
now."
anymore.
"For now," she
What is your
repeated, as if that answered something larger than
What is
he'd
your name?
intended.
Joseph.
"My name is Marta Neumann.
Joseph,
This is my
Emil.
brother Emil." She
You are
glanced
not
at the
what you
boy,
seem.
who was watching Lucas with the calculating look of a child who has recently learned
I'm not
that
here to
adults
hurt you.
lie. "We
name
came
is
from
Klaus.
Gumbinnen. Our school was used as a field hospital.
Klaus.
Then it wasn't anything anymore."
Anya,
Lucas introduced himself. He felt
must
strange
return.
giving his name.
we have to go
The
back
routine
to
of
the ridge.
it, the ordinary human
I
courtesy
heard
of
you
it
the
in the
first
middle
time.
of all this.
We're almost there.
"Where are you going?"
Somewhere.
he asked. "Pilau, the ships." She said it the way people said things they've repeated so many times the words had worn
The
smooth.
ridge is clear.
"And you?" "Same direction, more or less."
We can move.
Let's
Mertens
go.
appeared at Lucas's shoulder. He looked at Marta and Emil the way he
You are
looked at
not
terrain,
authorized to proceed
assessing
past this
obstacles,
point.
calculating
Stay
delays.
here and await
"We're not an
further
escort
instructions.
service," he said.
That is all.
Not unkindly, but not
That's
otherwise.
nice, sister.
"I'm not asking for an escort," Marta said.
No.
She held his gaze.
We're choosing with somebody.
Mertens had a way of looking at people that made most of them look down. She didn't. "I'm asking for nothing." Mertens studied her for a moment, then moved ahead without responding. By midday, the column had slowed to near stopping. A cart had broken an axle 200 meters ahead. Lucas could hear the shouting, and the whole line compressed like an accordion. Men, women, and children bunched together, and the road's vulnerability suddenly became obvious. Packed, slow, no cover on either side for 50 meters. Lucas found himself beside Emil, who had stopped gripping his sister's coat and was now walking on his own with calculated nonchalance. "You're from Dortmund?" the boy said, having
They
apparently
lied.
overheard something earlier.
Sometimes.
"Yes."
But they tried to protect
"Is
us.
it still there?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. He thought of his mother's last letter, 3 months old now, mentioning the sound of British aircraft overhead at night.
I cannot
"I
promise
don't
you
know,"
that.
he said honestly. Emil seemed
know.
to respect
I
that.
know.
He nodded
I
slowly,
understand.
the way people nod when they've accepted that honesty is the best remaining currency.
Cigarettes.
Further along the column,
Some of your
Hoffman
potatoes,
had
perhaps.
produced from somewhere in his kit 3 cigarettes and was trading them with an old farmer for a heel of dark bread. The transaction was wordless, solemn, 2 men agreeing on a rate of exchange in a world where the usual valuations had dissolved. Recker had found a child's dropped glove in the snow and was carrying it as he walked, looking for whose it was. Small gestures,
Look, here.
the kind that
we go
mean
north
nothing
now.
and everything. Mertens called a halt when the column finally began moving again. He pulled the map out, looked at the next marked position, and drew a new line in pencil.
objective remains.
The original
approach
route
must be
through the
altered
village of
immediately. We
Ludwigsort
go in hard,
had a question
quiet.
mark next to it now.
Yes, sir.
There are reports of Soviet scouts cutting the Ludwigsort
stands.
road, he said to the
Reroute is
group,
not an option.
keeping his voice
You
low.
must.
We go
Otherwise
through the
we face
Tannenberg
certain
forest
annihilation.
instead. It adds 4
You can't be
kilometers.
serious.
Through the swamp forest at night, Baumann said.
I've
Through
made
the
my
forest.
decision.
Mertens looked up. We leave at last light. Lucas looked at the trees in the middle distance. Dense, dark even in afternoon, the kind of pine forest that closed around you. He thought of the sniper the night before, the footprints that ended on hard ice. He said nothing. He cleaned his rifle. He counted the rations. 2 days, perhaps 3 if stretched. He took out the letter and added a line.
The school teacher.
We are still moving. The road is crowded with people who
She
have
did
nowhere
not
to
look
go.
down.
I met a school teacher today who looked at an Unteroffizier without looking down. I keep thinking about that. The forest took them in like something swallowing. They left the road at dusk, 8 soldiers, and because
Double check your
Mertens
gear.
hadn't actually
Ready?
said no, and
let's
Marta
move.
had simply fallen in behind them with Emil. 9 people total. The pine forest northwest of Ludwigsort had no path. Mertens navigated by compass and by a memory of the terrain from a map that was already 2 weeks out of date, which in this war might as well have been 2 years. The swamp sections began within the first kilometer. Not deep, not yet, but the ground went soft underfoot, and each step required attention, the ice crust sometimes holding, sometimes cracking through into dark water that filled a boot in seconds. Lucas walked second in line, behind Kern, who was on point, and counted his steps the way he used to count engine components in the mechanics shop in Dortmund. It was the same discipline, systematic, tactile, focused on the immediate object. Marta was behind him. He could hear her steady breathing and the softer, faster breath of Emil beside her. They had been in the trees for 90 minutes when Fischer, at the rear of the column, disappeared. Not dramatically,
again.
not with a shout.
There's a gap.
Lucas only noticed because
Someone is
Mertens
missing.
stopped and counted heads, the way he always did when they halted, and then counted again. Where is Fischer? Silence. Herfmann, who had been walking ahead of Fischer, said he'd heard nothing. No shot, no cry, no branch snap. He'd simply looked back at one point and Fischer was there, and at the next point he wasn't. Mertens's jaw tightened. He sent Baumann and Recker back 20 meters. They found Fischer's
The
boot
objective
prints in
has
the
not
soft
changed.
ground,
We
then
move
nothing.
forward
As
as
if he'd
ordered.
stepped off the edge of something that left no mark. Scouts, Kern said quietly. Or he ran, Baumann said. It landed badly. The men looked at each other in the darkness, the accusation hanging in the cold
They said
air.
The city would hold.
Fischer had
They
been
lied.
talking the last few
We are
days about his
surrounded.
wife in
Soon the
Königsberg,
forest will be our grave
about the
too.
city falling, about what
My
happens to
brother is not
women
a
when
coward.
cities fall.
He followed
Everyone had
orders,
heard him.
and I will
Everyone
not
had
stand
thought
here
the same
and let you
things.
slander his name.
He didn't run, Hoffman said sharply. You don't know that, Baumann said.
The decision
Enough.
is final.
Mertens's voice was flat and final. He's gone. We move. If he ran, God help him. If they took him... He stopped. We move. Lucas looked at the space where Fischer's footprints ended. The forest was absolute darkness beyond the range of their carefully shielded torch. And somewhere out there the Soviets were moving in it, with the easy confidence of people who had learned this ground, learned this war, learned to be patient beyond what seemed human. He thought, they are not different from us. They are cold too. They are counting something too. Ammunition, days, whatever it is that keeps people moving when moving makes no sense, he thought. That doesn't help Fischer. They pushed on. The swamp deepened and twice the group had to detour around patches where the ice had failed completely, dark water showing beneath. Emil stumbled once,
Careful.
and Lucas caught his arm before the boy went in, and they looked
Gotcha.
at each other for
Are
a
you all
moment.
right?
The boy's face white
right,
in the
kid?
darkness, grateful and humiliated at
You
once.
gotta watch your step.
The look of someone
I'm fine.
14 years old who
Just
is trying
stairs.
very
Careful.
hard not to
Come
need
on.
saving. It's fine,
You'll be
Lucas
alright,
said.
Emil.
Same thing
keep
happened to
moving.
me on the first night.
Thank you. I
It
will.
hadn't. But Emil nodded and straightened and kept walking. At the forest's edge, 3 kilometers later, they stopped at a farmstead, a stone barn and a low house, windows dark, the yard trampled by recent passage. On the barn's outer wall, painted in red, a 5-pointed star. Recent enough that the paint hadn't fully frozen. Someone had been here. Possibly someone still was. Mertens held the group back and studied the building. Then he gestured for Kern and Lucas to follow him in. The barn was dim and smelled of old hay and something metallic.
Empty.
Blood, Lucas realized.
Wrappings, the
Though old
ampoules.
enough that it wasn't
This
alarming,
was a medic station.
it had been used as a dressing
They left in a
station
hurry.
recently by someone. Bandage wrappers on the ground, empty morphine ampules, and in the far corner, on a pile of straw behind an overturned feeding trough, a figure, a Soviet soldier. Young, possibly younger than Lucas. Left leg wrapped in a field dressing that had soaked through dark. He was conscious, barely, watching them with eyes that were afraid and trying not to
I have
be.
him.
Kern raised his rifle.
Stay
Wait,
put.
Lucas said.
Don't move.
The word came
No,
out
I'm going
before
in.
he'd decided on it. Mertens looked at the wounded man, looked at Lucas. The barn held its silence.
What is your
The
name?
Soviet soldier
Ivan.
said something. Low, rapid Russian Lucas didn't understand and then stopped, apparently concluding that speaking was pointless. He looked at Kern's rifle with the expression of someone doing a calculation and arriving at a number they don't
choice but
like.
to do this.
No, we
He's
cannot
finished,
do this.
Kern said.
It's wrong.
That leg, he's alone,
The
Lucas
time
said.
for waiting has passed.
He's not a threat.
We proceed
Every
with the plan.
one of them is a threat, Mertens said. But he said it slowly and he didn't move. Lucas crouched down to the soldier's level. He pointed to himself. Lucas, he said, feeling ridiculous.
Duh.
He pointed to the man's bandage, made a questioning gesture. The soldier stared at him. Then, slowly, he
Duh.
pointed to himself. Alexei, he said. The name sat in the cold air of the barn. Mertens turned away and walked to the barn door. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the night. Then he said quietly, "We rest here 2 hours. No fires, no
Hold the
noise."
line.
A pause.
No retreat.
See if there's anything in the house.
Retreat.
He didn't say anything
Stand.
about Alexei. Lucas looked
Here.
at the wounded man,
This will help.
Alexei, who had a name now, which made everything harder and more necessary at once. He went to his kit, found his last field dressing, and held it out. Alexei looked at it, looked at Lucas. He took it. Later, when the group was settled in the hay and Marta
We
was
saw them
sitting with
crossing the
Emil's
bridge.
head in her
There
lap
were
while
too
he
many for us
slept,
to stop.
she leaned over
We
to
have get 'em
Lucas and
across
said
before
softly,
morning. It's our only chance.
"That was a human
You have to
thing
stop
you did."
us.
So no,
Mertens
I know
let it
what I
happen,
had to do.
Lucas said. "That's the
I
point,"
know what I had
she
to
said.
do.
He didn't fully understand her until later when they woke at the 2-hour mark to leave and found that Mertens had, at some point during those 2 hours, gone back to the corner where Alexei lay. The Soviet soldier was still there, alive. But Mertens's face when he came back to the group carried something new in it, something closed off, settled, that he wore for the rest of the retreat like a stone in a coat pocket. Nobody asked, nobody would. The word Pilau moved through the column the way fever moves through a body. Fast, unpredictable, hitting some people harder than others. By the time Lucas's group rejoined the main refugee flow the next morning, it was everywhere. Ships at Pilau, evacuation, the Baltic West. It was not quite hope. Hope implied probability. This was something more desperate, the refusal to consider alternatives, because the alternatives were the Soviets closing the pocket entirely and
The
surrender
next
becoming the
kilometer,
only
the next
mathematics.
position, the next hour.
Mertens didn't talk about
Focus.
Pilau.
Keep
He
your
talked
eyes on
about the
road.
next position
Do
on the
not
map,
look at Pilau.
the next kilometer,
next
the next
kilometer
hour.
will be
It was a
crucial.
discipline Lucas had come to
Stay
understand was
focused
load-bearing.
and maintain our
If
pace.
Mertens started thinking about Pilau, about the ships, about what comes after the ships, the whole structure of his authority over these 7 remaining men might simply stop making sense.
Over there,
So he
near that
didn't.
ridge.
The men were
That's
fraying
where we found
differently.
the horses
Hoffman had
frozen
become very
solid.
quiet,
A
which was
sight I'll
more
never
worrying
forget.
than loudness.
That
Recker
winter,
talked constantly
we found
about small
snacks in the
things.
cellar.
The bakery
Muller
near his
drank
post
so
office
much
in
he couldn't
Hanover,
stand.
the exact way
We
his
laughed
wife
until
made
the patrol
Eintopf.
found us.
And Lucas recognized this as a man building a floor out of ordinary memories to stand on. Baumann had become aggressive in small ways, arguing over ration distribution, snapping at Kern, questioning Mertens's route choices in ways that were technically reasonable, but carried something else underneath. Kern just walked. Kern had been walking since Minsk, Lucas was pretty sure, and intended to keep walking until the ground ran out. Emil fell ill on the third day after the forest.
We're almost
It
there.
came quickly, the way cold weather illness does.
I'm tired.
Fine in the morning, flushed and shaking by midday,
God.
burning by dusk.
Burning up.
Marta kept her hand on his
We have
forehead
to
and her
move
face
him.
composed,
but look at the
but
line.
Lucas saw her jaw
We can't
tighten
stop.
every time she checked his temperature against her
They said
palm.
Emil's lungs are failing.
It's his
We have to move
lungs,
him
she
immediately.
said.
To the
He had
forest camp.
bronchitis as a
Nice.
child.
Prepare the
The
transport.
cold.
I can help
I know
you. The
someone
army
in the
medics have
column,
supplies.
Lucas said.
No, they don't.
An
This
army
kindness
medic.
won't
I saw his
reach.
bag yesterday.
I know where to
The
find
army
them.
medics have nothing to spare.
Please.
Leave that to me. Mertens caught him
Where
before
you
he
going?
left.
I've made my
Where are you
decision.
going? Lucas told him.
Do you understand
Mertens
the
was silent
implications?
for a moment.
Keep
He looked
moving,
at
lads.
Emil, who was
Can't
lying on a
stop here.
cart's tailgate, wrapped in everything they could pile on him.
I can't breathe.
You're going to give something for that? He said, and there was no inflection in it.
Yes.
Not accusation, not
Are you
approval.
prepared?
Yes.
Yes.
Mertens
Yeah.
studied him. Be back in 20 minutes. The medic's name was Waldman, and he was a man who had seen too much and arrived at a kind of professional exhaustion that had burned away sentimentality without burning away competence. He had sulfonamide tablets, a small supply, hoarded,
understand the risk.
intended for his own men.
They need this.
For a
is not
civilian
within my
boy,
protocol.
he said. For a
Lives are
sick
depending on
child,
you.
Lucas said. Waldman looked at him. What do you have? Lucas had 3 cigarettes, a pocket knife with a broken tip that still worked, and the watch his father had given him on the day he was conscripted. A plain brass-cased thing, not valuable except that it kept time and was from his father. He put the watch on the cart beside Waldman. Waldman looked at it for a long moment.
No, I cannot
Then he
accept
counted
this.
out 12 tablets
Please,
and folded them
take
into a paper square. I don't want your watch, he said. He pushed the tablets toward
3
Lucas.
boys.
I have 3 boys at home, or I
They
had.
died for this.
He turned back to his kit. Get the child
Cal.
warm. Lucas stood there a moment, then pocketed the tablets and the watch both. He walked back quickly, and he did not examine his own
Keep this
feelings
close.
about what had just
Thank
happened,
you.
because there wasn't time,
Thanks.
and because some feelings needed to wait for a world that was slower than this one. Emil improved by the next morning. Not well, but sitting up, taking water. Marta looked at Lucas with an expression he couldn't fully read, but that included somewhere in it something close to gratitude without obligation, the kind that acknowledges a debt while refusing to be owned by it.
20
Pillau
kilometers.
is 20
If the
kilometers,
road holds.
Mertens said, looking at the map that morning. If the road holds, if was doing considerable work in that sentence. The arguments about surrender had started the night before, whispered first, then louder. Baumann said there were rumors of organized German holdouts near Heiligenbeil, that Pillau might be cut off before they arrived. Hoffmann said nothing mattered except the ships. Kern said
know what I
whoever was
saw.
still alive when they got
We
there
can't trust them.
would figure it out
Enough.
then. Lucas sat apart from it and cleaned his rifle and tried to write in the letter and found he had nothing to add. The letter was becoming a kind of record, not of events exactly, but of the texture of days. He thought that perhaps that was enough. The last ambush came at dawn, as they always do. They had been on the road since 3 in the morning, moving in the column's dark current, frost so hard it turned every exhalation into a cloud. The flat land east of Pillau offered no cover, just fields, a frozen drainage ditch on one side, a line of alder trees on the other, and the road running straight as a ruler toward the distant smell of salt water. They heard the ship's horns in the darkness, muffled, distant, but real. Men in the column straightened when they heard it, a sound from the world before. The Soviets hit from the alders, not a sniper this time. A coordinated strike, automatic weapons from 2 positions, a third gun covering the road's far end. The column exploded into chaos, carts overturning, horses screaming, people running in every direction at once. Lucas was already in the ditch before he knew he'd moved, rifle up, looking for targets in the tree line that had become fire and muzzle flash. Mertens was shouting, "Flank left, Kern, Baumann left, Hoffmann with me." And in the middle of the road, Between the ditch and the alders, Marta was flat in the snow behind an overturned cart with
Situation
Emil beside
report.
her. 3 civilians were with them.
What's the target?
They were 20 meters into the open,
Blanking
and
fire
the
from the
Soviet
alders.
firing
Pin them
lane
at the
covered them
carts.
directly. Mertens reached Lucas's
Press the
ditch
left flank to
position in a
sustain
crouch,
fire.
breathing hard.
Break right.
He took in the situation,
Understood.
the Soviet positions, the pinned civilians, the lane of fire. "We suppress left," he said. 2 men break right across the open ground to pull them into cover. "That's 40 meters in the open." "Yes." Lucas looked at the cart, at Marta's coat, dark against the white snow,
Saw him near the red
at
barn.
Emil's face, pale, visible, turned sideways looking at the tree
Are
line.
you certain?
He looked at Mertens. "I'll go," Lucas said.
I know who you
Mertens looked at him for a long, still moment.
are. And I know
There
what
was
I have to
something
do.
in it. Recognition, maybe, or something that had been building since the barn, since Alexei, since the watch on the medic's cart. Something being passed. "On my count," Mertens said, "we give you cover." The suppression fire opened. Mertens, Kern, Hoffman, all of them hitting the older line hard enough to force the Soviet guns back. Lucas left the ditch at a run, leaning forward as if into a wind. The snow hard under his boots and the air full of sound. Rounds cracking overhead. Someone shouting in Russian. The hollow thunder of a grenade
get
somewhere
out,
to his
get out.
right. He reached the cart. He
Run.
grabbed Emil first,
Get to the ditch.
got him up,
Go, go,
pushed
go.
him toward the ditch, and watched him run.
Now.
Then
Into the
Marta,
ditch.
she was already moving, already upright, had been waiting for exactly this. The 3 civilians followed.
Keep running.
Lucas was last. He was 10 meters from the ditch when the fire shifted back toward him, and he dropped to one knee,
Just wait.
returned fire once, twice, into the alders, not aiming, just creating noise, creating a moment of hesitation in someone's trigger finger. He threw himself into the ditch. The firing continued for another 3 minutes, then stopped as fast as it had started. The Soviets withdrew. Small team tactics hit and dissolve. No interest in a sustained engagement. The column reformed slowly,
1,
horribly. Lucas
2,
counted from the ditch. 2 soldiers dead. Recker, who had walked since Hanover talking about his wife's Eintopf, was lying in the road. An old man from the column, still in a good city coat, sat in the snow holding his arm. A child was crying somewhere behind the carts. Mertens came to Lucas without speaking. He put a hand briefly on his shoulder, 1 second, maybe 2, and then removed it. They walked the last 11 kilometers to Pillau in silence. The harbor was a controlled disaster. Ships loading under shell fire, officers with lists arguing with officers without lists, civilians pressing against barriers that were holding only because everyone was too exhausted to push properly. The Baltic was iron gray and moving, and the smell of it cut through everything.
We've got our orders.
Mertens got the remaining
Understood,
men
sir.
together,
Let's move.
5 soldiers now with Lucas. He looked at the map one last time, then folded it and put it in his coat. He didn't take it out again. Marta and Emil were in the civilian queue 50 meters away. Emil was on his feet, pale but standing. Marta had one hand on his back and was looking at the ships with the expression of someone doing arithmetic that might not work out. Lucas
Do you
walked
think
over
they'll
to
come
her.
for us?
"Will you make
I
it?"
don't know.
he said. "Will you?" she replied. He didn't have an answer, and she knew it. She nodded once, not goodbye. Something else. Something that acknowledged that they had moved through the same dark together for a specific number of days, and that this had been real, and that reality in wartime doesn't need to be explained. "The letter," she said, "in your pocket. Send it when you can."
I didn't
He looked
tell
at
you.
her. He hadn't told her about the letter. "You hold it like it matters," she said simply. He watched her turn back to Emil, back to the queue, back to the arithmetic of
Look at them.
survival.
They've got a chance.
Mertens appeared
But
beside
what
him.
happens after?
The ship at Pier
question
4
hangs, doesn't
is
it?
taking military wounded and support personnel.
After?
We have a chance.
Yes.
What about after? Lucas said.
I haven't
What
let
comes
myself
after?
Consider that.
Mertens was quiet for a moment. Around them, Pillau heaved with noise. The ships, the guns to the east that were getting closer. The constant human sound of thousands of people
After
at
we
the edge
survive
of what
today,
they
we
could
worry about
endure.
After. Yes.
After we survive today,
That is the
Mertens
only
said,
way.
we worry about after. They walked toward Pier 4. Lucas reached into his pocket and touched the folded letter. He added one final line in his head, the line he would write when he found a place to write it. We made it to the water. I don't know what the water leads to, but Marta was right. It matters that we were human when we could have been otherwise. Hold on to that, Mama. I think that's what I'm trying to tell you. The ship's horns sounded again across the grey Baltic. Somewhere behind them, the eastern guns answered. The survivors walked onto the dock, carrying the weight of what they had done to live one more night, and stepped uncertainly into whatever came after the silence.